back to Loners and Rebels. Well, we made it. End of the season, and before anyone asks, sorry to report, Einliebe's drama is still very much simmering. I'm still waiting on records, still chasing threads, still not willing to rush it just to wrap it neatly. So that was not here yet. Instead, this season is more of a step back. Less about one story and more about what the season actually did to me after sitting with it as long as I have. When I started this podcast, it wasn't some big plan. I was finding all these stories and honestly no one around me was interested. Or at least not the way I was. And I remember thinking there had to be other people out there who would get it. Who would find this just as fascinating, just as exciting, just as human. Season 1 was me testing that. And then people showed up. People listened. People reached out. People saw themselves in it. And instead of making me pull back or second guess it, it did the opposite. It made me feel more comfortable leaning in, being more honest, saying the parts I probably would have softened before. So this season went deeper, not just in the research, but in how it felt to sit with it. Because at a certain point, this stops being about learning history and starts being about recognizing patterns, seeing things you didn't notice before, or maybe things you did notice but didn't have the language for yet. This season didn't feel like discovery, it felt like recognition. And that's what this episode is. Not a recap or a highlight reel. Just what each of these stories opened up, what stuck, what didn't sit right, and the questions I'm still sitting with now that it's all done. There was Clara. I had actually written her story last season and then didn't record it. I shelved it. And if I'm being honest, that wasn't random. There's a history there for me and my paternal grandmother, or really the lack of one, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go digging into her mother. But this season felt different. After putting the first one out and seeing how people connected to it, I felt more comfortable going back to the things I've avoided the first time. So I went back to Clara, and this time I didn't just revisit her story, I sat with it. I don't even know that I had a clear expectation going in. She's one of those people that kind of waits, like she knew I'd come back when I was ready. And when I did, it wasn't about uncovering something new. It was about actually seeing what was already there. The moment it shifted for me was her photo, the one from National Geographic. She's got a flower in her hair, and there's that line, like a clock, I guess. And something about that just landed in a way I didn't expect. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't trying to mean something. It was just, you do what you have to do. You keep going. You carry it. And that's the part that stuck, because it felt familiar in a way I didn't love. That constant sense of carrying everything, of pushing through instead of pausing, of struggling more often than you're comfortable. And it made me realize I've probably always known, but haven't really said out loud. This doesn't feel new, it feels inherited. There's this thread running through it, through her, through the family, through me, where survival is the baseline. Not thriving, not ease, just getting through. And if I'm being honest, there's a part of me that's always been a little envious of people who don't live like that, who don't feel like everything comes with weight attached to it. And that's where it stopped being about Clara. Because the question it left me with wasn't about her life, it was about mine. Does it stop? At any point, does it actually get lighter? Or is this just the rhythm? Like a clock. There was Billy May. And this one felt different from the start because she's not mine. This was the first time I stepped outside my own family into someone else's story, and I felt a responsibility to get it right. Not just for the sake of the story, but for my dear friend Mandy, and more than that, for her dad and her aunt. Because their experience of Billy May has always been one of abandonment. So going into it, I wasn't just researching. I was trying to understand if there was more to her than the version they were left with. What I didn't expect was how early it all started. The relationship patterns, the instability, the way everything seemed to shift before she ever had a chance to decide anything for herself. Her father leaving for another woman, then divorcing that woman, then going back and remarrying her mother. then the whole family picking up and moving across the country. That's before we even get to her. Before she was a child bride at 14. Before the annulment. Before she's married again at 17. And that's the part that stuck with me. Not just what happened, but when it happened. Because it made me realize how early those patterns get set, especially for women. What you see growing up, what love looks like, what stability looks like, what leaving looks like. It doesn't just stay in the background. It becomes the blueprint. And I think that's what this opened up for me. This idea that we like to believe we're making clean, independent choices as adults. But a lot of the time we're just repeating something that felt normal before we even knew what normal was. And that's where this one got uncomfortable, because it shifts the question from why did she do that to something a little harder. What did she ever actually get to choose? And more than anything, it left me wanting something I'll never really get, a conversation with her. Not to judge, not to rewrite anything, just to understand how she felt in the middle of all of it. What she would have done differently, if anything. What she carried that nobody else ever saw. Because the story we inherit about someone isn't always the full story. Sometimes it's just the part that impacted everyone else. There was Haskell and Fillmore, and I'll be honest, going into that one, I thought it was going to be a break, a fun one, a pirate story, the kind you'd read as a kid in a blanket fort, flashlight in hand, fully convinced you'll end up on some kind of adventure yourself. Very Goonies, very chaos, but in a safe storybook way. And for a minute it felt like that, until it didn't. Because the part that stuck with me wasn't the adventure, it was the boldness of it. The fact that there were 3 of them, 3, taking over a ship and deciding this was the only way out. No backup plan, no safety net, just this works or it doesn't. And that kind of desperation doesn't feel like a story anymore, it feels real. The shift for me came when I went deeper into Fillmore's side of it. His father was lost at sea, his mother only allowing him to go with Haskell. That level of trust, or maybe lack of options, I don't even know. And then realizing I was connected to both of them. That this wasn't just some wild story sitting out there in history, it was part of my own line. And then my brain did what it always does and went straight to the domino effect. If that moment goes differently, if he doesn't survive, if that plan falls apart, there's no President Fillmore. John was President Fillmore's great-grandfather. Very Back to the Future. One wrong move and the whole timeline shifts. Somewhere George McFly is disappearing mid-dance to Night Train and everything just blinks out. But underneath all of that, what it opened up for me was something simpler. Bravery. Not the polished, heroic version of it. The messy kind. The kind that comes from having no other option. The kind that looks reckless from the outside but feels necessary in the moment. And honestly, it also pulled me right back into that connection I have with New England. Boston, the coast, the history of it all. There's something about those stories that just feels like home, even when they're chaotic. And I think the question it left me with is this. How much of what we call bravery is actually just survival in disguise? Because from the outside, it's easy to romanticize it. But in the moment, I don't think it feels like courage. I think it just feels like this is the only move left. There was my 3rd great-grandfather, John Henry Robinson. I didn't really know what I was going to find going into his story. I was excited more than anything. Another generation, another piece of the puzzle. But there was this question sitting there from the start. Why did he die in New York? We don't have roots there. It didn't make sense. My brain immediately went to something dramatic, something tied to the sea, a ship accident, something sudden. And then I found the death record. That's when Sailor Snug Harbor came into the picture. And at first it just felt like another discovery, another place, another record, something to plug into the timeline. But the moment it became real was realizing who he actually was in a bigger picture. He was the first Robinson in my line to become an American citizen. That's not a small detail, that's a beginning. That's someone stepping into something entirely new and making it stick. And then it shifted. I read his application to sailor Snug Harbor, and suddenly his life wasn't just a name in a tree anymore. It was decades. A working life at sea. Years of movement, of labor, and surviving out there. And then that's where he ended up, after all that. And I think that's what opened something up for me. That same thread again, the struggle. It doesn't look the same in every generation, but it's there. He spent his life working, moving, building something, and at the end, he's in a home. Not because he failed, not because he didn't try, but because his children had their own struggles, their own weight to carry. And that part made me sad in a way I didn't expect. Because it makes you wonder what rest actually looks like for people like this, for men like him, proud, tough, the kind that just kept going because that's what they know how to do. Do they ever actually get to rest, or do they just stop? And I think that's the question this one left me with. Not about where he died, but about how it felt. At the end of all that, did it feel like peace or just finished? There was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And going into her story, I think I expected something a little more distant. Someone well-known, already defined, already understood. The kind of figure you learn about in school where everything feels polished and resolved, like her place in history is already settled. But that's not what it felt like when I actually sat with her. Because the version of her that exists in textbooks is clean, it's summarized. It's reduced to a few key moments and accomplishments. What I didn't expect was how much tension sat underneath all of that. How much resistance she faced, not just from the world around her, but from the system she was trying to exist within. I think the shift for me happened when I really started looking at what she was up against at the time, not just legally, but socially. The expectations placed on her as a woman, the limitations, the constant push to stay in a certain role. And she just didn't. Not quietly frustrated, not this feels unfair. She was angry enough to do something about it, and she carried that into everything she did. That's what stuck with me. Because it opened up this contrast I hadn't fully put into words yet. After sitting with so many stories this season about survival, endurance, carrying weight, here's someone who didn't just carry it. She pushed back against it. She questioned it. She challenged it. She refused to accept it as the default. That contrast stayed with me, because it made me realize that those two things can exist in the same line, the struggle and the defiance, the endurance and the refusal. They're not opposites, they're connected. And I think that's what this opened up for me personally. The idea that just because something has been carried for generations doesn't mean it has to stay that way. That recognition doesn't just lead to understanding, it can lead to change. And that's not easy. It's uncomfortable. It disrupts things. It forces you to look at what you've accepted as normal and ask if it actually should be. And I think that's why her story landed the way it did. Because it wasn't just about what she did. It was about what she refused to accept. And the question it left me with wasn't about her, it was about me. If you can see the pattern clearly, if you can name it, if you know where it comes from, what are you going to do with that? When I look back at this season, it's not the individual stories that stand out the most. It's the threads between them. Clara carrying everything because that's what she had to do. Billy May shaped by patterns she didn't create but still lived inside of. Haskell and Fillmore making a decision in a single moment that changed everything that came after. Robinson spending a lifetime moving forward, only to end up somewhere still. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton refusing to accept what everyone else treated as normal. Different lives, different circumstances, same patterns. Carrying, surviving, repeating, and sometimes pushing back. This season didn't feel like discovery. It did feel like recognition. Seeing the same thing show up in different forms, across different generations, across different lives, and realizing none of it exists in isolation. The struggle doesn't start with us, but it also doesn't have to end the same way. Once you can see it clearly, once you can name it, Once you can understand where it comes from, you get a choice. Not an easy one or a clean one, but a real one. You can carry it the same way it's always been carried, or you can do something different with it. I don't think I had really sat with that before this season, not in a real way. This wasn't just about learning where I come from, it was about understanding what I'm holding and deciding what I actually want to do with it. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, I had this thought that I wrote down last weekend. Bedroom kid into living room adult. What a dream. That kid sitting there writing plays and stories on a typewriter would have thought this is so cool. Thanks for being here for this season of Loners and Rebels. See you later.